Hey everyone, Emmanuel here with part 2 of breathwork. In this part, we're going to be covering off breathing and movement. So in the first part, we covered off just breathing and in stationary positions, just to getting to know our breath. Now we're going to start to integrate breathing and movement, okay? So in the same fashion, we're going to apply it to movement. So the three basic ways that we move, first would be walking, running, and then also movements on the ground. So it would be like on the mats, so to speak, right? So kind of like wrestling, but those kind of movements. So the same things apply, but now there's an action to it. So both are good. So you need to know how to breathe just standing still, and as well during movement. The key is to make sure that you never lose sight of your breathing. So the breathing has to be working as a pump, I guess. It's just kind of constantly there. You're trying to, at the beginning now, you're bringing a lot of thought to it. It's very thoughtful, the breathing. But then later on, it'll go towards the subconscious, where it's just working in the background as you're doing what you're doing. So bring great focus to the breathing as you're walking, running, and moving on the ground. So I'll show you some ways. So as you're walking, you'll often hear in Systema classes or on video, to count your steps. And that's a great place to start, because counting is easy to remember. So it's a great way to start. So in walking, as you take one step, you inhale through the nose, and as you take a second step, you exhale through the mouth. And no need to change your walk. Just keep it as a comfortable walk, something that you would normally do throughout your day, okay? So with one step you inhale, with one step you exhale. Now that's a kind of a fast cadence, to be honest with you. So what I'd want you to do then is start to slowly increase it like you did your stationary breathing. So think of your steps. I'll just kind of show you, because if I do it with a video, it might be hard to see. So I inhale with one step, and then I take a second step and I continue to inhale. And then I exhale and I exhale. And you do that same thing, 3. So inhale, 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 exhale, exhale, exhale. And you do that all the way up to 10, 15, 20, as high as your inhale and exhale will let you go. Now, at the very beginning, you might find it beneficial to add a little like pause or a pulse. So it's like, so like you can actually hear the count in between. But then naturally later on, try to let that disappear so that it's just one smooth 3 count inhale. So that, so it's smoother, so you don't have those edges. But at the beginning, it's totally normal and totally fine to add like a pulse or a pause in between all those numbers. So keep in mind, when you're walking, you can walk forward, you can walk backwards as well, you can even walk kind of sideways, and then you can even walk in kind of like a butterfly pattern, like with no real direction, kind of a little bit everywhere. It doesn't really matter, the direction, as long as you're conscious of your breathing and how the steps that you make are impacting to that. So essentially it's one step in, one step out in any direction. And then, or 5 steps in, 5 steps out in any direction, okay? And the same applies for a run, okay? What I mean by a run, kind of like a light jog. And then you could even apply it to even faster applications. But what you'll notice, the faster you go, it's harder to get deeper breaths in, right? So you have walking, you have running, and then you have ground as well. Now the walking and the running are somewhat similar, just a little bit faster, and you kind of get what I mean when I do this, right? Or backwards, or kind of sideways, or in a butterfly pattern. So in the beginning, it's important that it's consistent, like 1 for 1. So if I do 4 in, I do 4 out. If I do 5 in, I do 5 out. If I do 10, I do 10. And it's really nice if you go as high as you can up and then kind of bring that back down, okay? And that's not right or wrong, but it's just a nice way to understand it, especially at the beginning. And you want to give this work at least 6 to 8 weeks to start to see some benefits, okay? This is not my opinion. This is pretty much well-known lore. When your body is going to adapt, when it's going through an adaptation cycle, 6 to 12 weeks is generally the norm. 6 to 8, 6 to 12, depending on how stubborn you are. That's usually, it takes time for the body to make adaptation and changes. So with the walking and the running, it's fairly straightforward. Just count your steps, forward, backwards, sideways, or scattered pattern. It doesn't matter. You just count your steps in, count your steps out. That's simple. On the ground, it gets a little tricky, but it is really the same thing. A movement is a movement, and you know what is a deliberate movement. So I'll kind of show you now for a second. Just kind of tilt the camera down just a tiny bit so you can see me. So if I'm on the ground right now, my hips or my butt is essentially like my feet, right? Or it can be really anything that's touching the ground. But if I'm here and I decide to go to my left, I breathe in, and then as I decide to go to my right, I breathe out. If I'm turning to my stomach, I breathe in, and as I turn to my back, or to my front, I breathe out. So any movements that you make on the ground are the same. So you could say, I'm gonna make two movements. So I'm gonna inhale, and then I'm gonna exhale, and I'm gonna exhale. So you just have to be aware of the movements that you make, because they'll be a completely different direction. So if I look this way, that's a direction. So I inhale. And then if I decide to go that way, I exhale. So you inhale one direction, you exhale another direction, and then you can count the changes of directions. You can make 4 or 5 direction changes, and then breathe out for 4 or 5 direction changes. What I really like about this, I really noticed this a lot when I was doing this training, how it improved my groundwork. I was never as cognizant. It forced me to be very cognizant of what is a change of direction. And I realized how many changes of directions we make for no apparent reason. We just fidgety more than aware. So it's really kind of, when we're on the ground, we want to get rid of any nervous behaviors. We want to be very aware of all the moves that we're saying, or all the moves that we're doing. So just keep that in the forefront of your mind. So walking, running, and on the ground, counting from 1 to 10, 15, 20, whatever you're comfortable. It's probably somewhere around 10 at the beginning, and then later it starts to stretch. So that would be a great place to start with this. Now, I applied this a couple of times to, because some brief history for me. When I was shown the breath work, like all students, it's not really glorious. It's kind of, I don't know, it's hard to show it off, right? Good breathing it doesn't build much ego, right? There's nothing to show off about it. So when I first saw it, I knew it was important, but I didn't realize how much. And I worked with it, but I felt I wasn't working with it enough. So I think it was about 4 years ago, I decided to do the running series in Toronto. So I think all cities have this. They have different races throughout the year progressively. Like the first one was starting like March, and it was like a 5K run. And there was another one in April that was like an 8K run. And then one in May that was a 10 run. And then June, a 15. And then the epitome becomes later on in the summer, where there's a series of marathons. And so I went through that series. So I spent an entire summer running, and I eventually did do the marathon series. And the funny thing that I noticed was I didn't do it because I wanted to run. I really wanted to work on my breathing. And what I found was that the breathing changes, like you change during a race, the course of a race. So the difference between 5K and 10K is not just twice as much. It's almost a completely different race. And the difference between 10 and 15 is completely different. The difference between 50 and the full marathon is completely different. Your breathing, different things happen to your body, and your breathing needs to support those changes in your body. Sometimes you're suffering with a pain of some sort, or a stitch or some sort of cramp. Other times you're going up a hill and the muscles are screaming at you. Other times your heart rate's just too fast for whatever reason. You got too excited, or there was somebody running alongside of you that made you run a little bit faster than you wanted to, so you kind of gassed yourself, so you're low on energy, and you had to change the breathing. So what I loved about it, it wasn't a smooth ride. You couldn't just say, this is twice as hard, or this is 3 times as hard. It's a completely different thing completely. There's nothing to compare it to. So it really forced me to look at the different phases and different types of breathing. So there is not a right or wrong with breathing. Just the more you do it, the more you understand. And that's the big thing. It's not, don't try and make breathing right or wrong. Try to build a better understanding of when it's right to use this and when it's right to use that. It's not right or wrong, but it's more appropriate to breathe like this in this situation, and more appropriate to breathe like that for that situation. So remember that these are critical things to practice for your entire life, especially through Systema. The more you practice this on a regular basis, the more the other stuff will make sense to you, because the breathing needs to operate at a place where it's subconscious. At the beginning, you're bringing a lot of awareness to it. There's no doubt, like this is very focused and aware. But as time goes on, you won't need to do that as much. It'll be operating in the background subconsciously. So put that work in with the walking, the running, and the groundwork in multiple directions, okay? In all sorts of directions. Try to avoid holding your breath as well, okay? I'll explain this in later videos about very specific about breath holds. So, but for now, especially at the beginning, try not to hold your breath. And you gotta be honest with yourself here, guys, because what happens is we don't realize how we put these little micro holds, like a little bit of a tightness in the neck or the chest, and it just, the breath stops for a brief moment and then starts again, but you don't pick up on it. You have to be very cognizant of smooth, light breathing. And if you lose your breathing, get it back to smooth and light. Don't leave it as bad breathing. Don't just throw it away. Keep smooth, light breathing. It keeps the psyche calm, it keeps the body calm, and it keeps you burning the right type of fuel. The more excited you get and the higher up your heart rate goes, your body starts to burn glycogen or sugar, as it's better known at. And you have a limited supply of glycogen, maybe 30, 40, 50 minutes of glycogen, and then after that, you'll start to fade. But if you keep your heart rate down, and that changes for everybody depending on your age and weight and height and those kind of things, but generally, if you keep a moderate heart rate, you're gonna burn a little bit of glycogen and you're gonna burn a little bit of fat. Now, fat, even for a very skinny person, there's plenty of it. If you look at marathon runners, they're very lean, okay? They're super lean and they are burning fat. You just can't see it, it's internal fat. And what I like about fat is it's a slow burning fuel, so it's low combustion, so to speak. So it's a cleaner fuel. It doesn't panic the body. It's like years ago when we were working on a farm, right? We weren't panicked. We just had something to do, and the body understood this condition and said, okay, Emmanuel is just doing some work around the farm, or he's not being chased by an animal, so he doesn't need this incredible energy. He just needs a low burning energy like fat. So all marathon runners or any cyclist, any endurance athlete understands this concept. You don't want to be chugging Gatorades and power bars. You want to rely on the body's source to fuel it. So breathing and relaxation helps you keep the heart rate down, which helps you burn a better fuel, which is fat, than sugar and carbohydrates. So you want to get to that place, and the breathing will help you there. And then by walking, by running, by moving on the ground, use the breathing to keep your heart rate down a little bit. Even 5 beats per minute, even 10 beats per minute less is huge, okay? It's absolutely enormous in terms of how much longer you can do that activity. So especially if you're training at a seminar where they're long, like they're 5 hours, 6 hours, some of them, you want to make sure that you have the energy physically and mentally to sustain the activity, the prolonged activity, okay? I hope this helps, guys. So running, any direction, walking, any direction, moving on the ground, any direction. Incorporate smooth inhales, smooth exhales, and go up the numbers as high as you can and go down as low as you can, and try not to hold your breath. And I'll talk about breath holds in a later video. Hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for part 3. Bye-bye.